All right, so who here is ready to talk about personification and like nothing else? Because personification is going to get its own very special treatment today. Hi everyone, again, I am Amanda, and if you are following me on this series and you are part of what we're working on here together, this is episode 2, installment 2 of our series on close reading. Different texts to use as supplementals in the units that you already have. And today's supplemental, the goal is to line up multiple examples of personification in literature. And you might be wondering, why on earth would I take the time to give personification an in-depth look? And to be honest, I feel like personification totally gets the short end of the stick all the time. We kind of slap the non-living object, gets human characteristics, and we walk away and it's fine and it's relatively easy to spot. It's not something that really trips kids up. They get it, they see it. It happens in multiple levels of text. I mean, everything from young books, and I read with my son who's in kindergarten, like I read books with him, we see personification, all the way through, very, very advanced levels of literature. Personification is everywhere, not hard to find. What is hard about personification, and many of the things we're going to look at in this series, is what we say about it. So what? And if we have not actually thought through what we would say as teachers on the back end, what would we be saying beyond identifying it, beyond highlighting it, beyond labeling it, then we have not done our job yet. And so today I really want to focus on what the goals are when we teach personification, and again, why it's worth it. Tell me I'm not alone in being the only person who feels like the only thing kids know how to say sometimes is it makes the story deeper. It makes the character more complex. It gives more details. So students think that they're analyzing, but in fact, they're just observing, right? They're observing things that are very surface level. And that's okay to start, but we need to be prepared to take them to the next level and show them where things are going. So personification, the root of personification is this idea of personhood, and giving personhood, giving human life to things that are not alive or things that are dead. Why would an author do that? Why do we ever think that that is something that has power? Why would we even stop and think about that? Taking personification through 2 different lenses has been very effective for me. So whenever I study personification, I try to figure out what in the passage or what in the full-length work that we're studying is that device most connected to. And I guess I should say 3 things, but usually it's just the first 2. So I'll give you my first 2. Does the personification impact the tone of the passage, the tone of the way a character is communicating? How do personification and tone work together? This is kind of what I teach also when I talk about rhetorical analysis. I never teach techniques alone. I teach techniques and how they work together. So we're not going to say, oh, this repetition exists and it's powerful because it's repeated multiple times. Well, no, the repetition emphasizes the logical appeal of the speaker. The personification, the choice of what's personified and how it's personified, right? If the house jumped, right? We're talking about, like, think about Fahrenheit 451. The house jumped, right? We're talking like page 1, Bradbury describes the house burning, and right, Bradbury's Montag is lighting this house on fire. The house jumped. The books were the wings of a bird fluttering, dead bird fluttering to the ground. What are the images that are being paired together, and how does the choice of those images impact the tone? That is one really powerful frame to teach with personification. So why was the house alive even though it was in the process of dying, right? The birds, right? The books being brought to life as these sad, innocent birds fluttering to their death. What is the impact of that image, that personification, in terms of the tone of that section of the reading? Okay, I hope that that's clear. The second place that I think personification is really powerful to teach, the different other lens we can look at it, would be in terms of setting. So much of Poe's work and lots of our like creepy gothic things do a lot of personification within the lines to use to describe the places and spaces that characters occupy. And so same thing, right? How does the personification impact our understanding or experience of the setting, which then usually also gets us to tone, right? A lot of times it's going to get us to tone, and that's important for us to know. I want to see where this is taking me before I'm going to bother to teach it, because if I can't see it all the way through that line, it's going to be hard for students to just figure it out on their own. And so when we think about close reading and we think about personification, we definitely want to make sure that we know that the personification is impacting the tone or the setting. Maybe it's impacting an attitude or a mood, right? Things like that. We want to know what the personification is impacting so that we can ask that question at the end of our close read very clearly, so that students don't have to make a lot of leaps between finding the personification, interpreting it, and then connecting it to those other things. We want to make that line for them really clear, because the work of doing the analysis is still really challenging. But if we can send them on the right line of thinking, we can let them do the speaking, the writing, and get a little messy there, because they're not floating around in the middle of the ocean. They're in a lane line, and that's what we want to give them, is the lane line, not, right? Good luck, don't drown. We don't want to give that to them. And so for today's passage, I wanted us to look at There's No One Like Her. The unbelievable Ruta Sepety has done it again. I Must Betray You is only one of many possible options you could use. Her signature move, Ruta Sepety's, her signature move is personification. And what's interesting about her personification, the way that she uses it, as a historical fiction writer, she is bringing history to life. And she is bringing some really dark emotions and experiences to life that are really hard to experience or to think about in general. And the personification that she uses gives weight to a lot of those experiences for her characters and for the places that she goes in these stories. So let's talk about I Must Betray You. I Must Betray You is, again, one of many. I actually first noticed her use of personification when I was reading Salt to the Sea. She does really similar things in that novel as she does here. But we are, I don't mean to brag, but this is my signed copy. In this novel, we are in Romania, 1989, and 17-year-old Christian, right? Because I need my glasses to tell you all these things. 17-year-old Christian dreams of becoming a writer, but Romanians aren't free to dream. They are bound by rules and force. Amid the tyrannical dictatorship of, I am so sorry, I do not remember how to pronounce this dictator's name. Nikolai C. In a country governed by isolation and fear, Christian is blackmailed by the secret police to become an informer. He is left with only two choices: betray everyone and everything he loves, or use his position to creatively undermine the most notoriously evil dictator in Eastern Europe. That is I Must Betray You. It's the whole story of this young man and his kind of quest to navigate the government, to kind of pull back the veil of what they've been told, to find out the truth, to fight back for his people, fight back for his family. And it's just a beautiful, gorgeous novel. The use of personification, like I said, is really tied to not only the mood and experience of this kind of gray, dark, sad, tragic space in history, but also the experiences between the relationships of the characters. So that's what we're going to look at today with personification. We'll look at other things too. I wouldn't say personification alone carries the novel or even carries the passage that we're going to look at, but it's a great place to identify, right, or to pinpoint, this is where personification is masterful. And so what can you pair it with? Anything, anything that has, in your curriculum where personification seems to kind of stand out as something unique to that author or unique to that space. It's really universal. And that's what I like about this passage. That's what I really like about this idea. And don't forget about poetry. Poetry is another great place to talk about personification and what it does and how it manifests in terms of tone, setting, and then even mood and attitude of the speaker. So let's jump into I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepety. All right, so let's get down to this super seemingly niche figurative language tool, author's choice tool, personification. This is something that I know for a long time. I didn't ignore personification, but I certainly never pushed the conversation as far as I could have. And I think now with these kinds of tools, that's going to be easier for you. And I think hopefully more memorable for your students too. Remember, the goal of doing this paired text, paired skills type of close reading is to create these foundational memories and experiences with these particular devices. We're trying to create depth and also, like, as an added benefit, breadth in terms of, right, seeing more text, seeing more voices. But really the goal is that we are deepening our understanding of what the power is that one particular tool can have. And so personification, right? This is something that Ruta Sepety, we're going to look at a passage from I Must Betray You. Ruta Sepety is an expert. This is her, I would say, one of her signatures for sure. And so I want to look at how she does that in this scene from her novel. And in this novel, the main character's life has just been turned upside down. His grandfather, he's just found out, that his grandfather is dead. The details of which are in the passage. There's not too much that you need to front load this with, other than, maybe the context that I shared with you at the beginning of this video. So let's take a look at this one and look at the ways in which personification, and additionally, kind of like we talked about in the grace here, there are additional things to look at as well. The signature or the lead here is personification, but how all of these tools work together to answer our writing task question. In the passage above, how does the author use personification to demonstrate the narrator's feelings about Bunu's death? So we have set this up so that the goal of personification is to demonstrate emotion, demonstrate feelings about what? About this character's grandfather's death. And so we already know what the goal is. To make this harder, maybe you don't give that to the students. They need to figure out what the personification is doing altogether. In this case, we've given them that scaffold. So let's take a look here. Bunu lay on the bed, but it wasn't Bunu. Life had fled and left a waxy corpse, a withered leaf that had lost its water. Bunu's gray skin stretched gaunt and taut over his angular cheekbones. His open eyes stared hollow and his mouth pulled wide as if living a silent scream, gasping for freedom. Ugh. I mean, horrifying. And the personification is so interesting here, right? Like, personification, as we define it, typically is to give human-like qualities to things that are not alive. And so we're looking at a corpse, and this corpse is human, but also not alive. So the description is it's describing, like, okay, so we've personified life, right? Life personified had fled. Life has actually left the body, but in its wake, has remained a waxy corpse, a withered leaf that had lost its water, right? So we got a beautiful metaphor there. I suppose we could probably do this, right? We could make this a half and half. Let's make this a half and half. Then we have this description of the corpse, and then the corpse is kind of brought back to life. It's personified, and it's given this open, hollow, mouth pulled wide, as if living a silent scream, gasping for freedom. So he's both like life has both completely abandoned him, but the life that is remaining in this corpse is is in total panic, fear, and helplessness. I mean, we could just stop here. We could just stop here. And the personification is working in this way to help us understand what a complicated experience this is to witness Bunu's body here in the room at this time. It is, I think, helpful to know that well, we haven't finished reading, but like the circumstances of his death were absolutely suspicious, which I think is really powerful in this idea of like the silent scream. That's all connected. So the main character says, my chest rose and fell, panting. Oh, sorry, I will fix that in your copy, but Buno, I'll double check what that's supposed to say and I'll fix that for you. He was feeling better and I stared at the husk of my grandfather. And then I realized, Mama, she turned to me, shook her head, and put a finger to her lips. I took a step closer to the bed. Bunu's hands lay like broken birds, their color a purple so dark, nearly black. The bones above his palms were snapped, smashed. Okay, so we've got this comparison going on, describing his bones. That's not what killed him, right? So we know that we got some color symbolism coming in here, and we also have got this broken bird comparison, right? Really kind of leaning into this is an elderly man, right? He is, whether or not he had powerful knowledge or something that he knew, he was a pretty defenseless and fragile person. And that didn't matter when his bones were snapped. All right, everything in his hands was smashed. Mama pulled back the blanket covering his legs. A wave of nausea rolled through me. Bunu's bare feet had been clubbed beyond recognition. His chest, the same, all ribs broken, she whispered in my ear. They beat him to death. My body was instantly cold, a rush of shock and frozen fury. I stood shaking at the side of the bed and felt myself buckling to the floor. Who did this? Who would viciously beat an elderly man? And why? My God, was leukemia not enough? How could I ever live without him? Right? We got lots of these questions he's asking himself. And then Mother responds, this is what happens to philosophers. We've got a little bit more personification that enters into the scene here. Sorrow, anger, an expanse of emptiness that takes form as a separate entity living inside of you. It digs, takes root, and dwells there. And somehow you know that even if it worms its way out, there will be no relief. If it leaves, there will be nothing left but charred remains, like the inside of a house torched by fire. I love this use of personification here. This to me is the perfect example of showing the difference to students between making a comparison and using personification. The Sepety doesn't write that the character felt sad or he was as sad as something else. No, the personification puts that life into the emotions that are feeling. Sorrow and anger aren't just something that you describe. They dig and take root and they dwell. They are part of the human experience in this grief. And that grief and sorrow and anger are alive in him and taking up space. That has such a different connotation about the narrator's experience in losing his grandfather than maybe just making a comparison or trying to use like a simile or a metaphor. It's a really, really powerful use of personification. And then it's followed up by an additional image, right? The inside of a house torched by fire. So these things are working together to deepen that pain, deepen the closeness, right? Like, I think it goes even further to think that the personification, relies on words like dig and root and dwelling. I mean, this is his family. It is quite literally his family tree, what he is connected to so closely. And so he's feeling this death in a way that is, he feels it inside of him. He feels it so closely. And I think this is a really interesting way of personifying death too. Later, he goes on to say that while the regime wedged and pushed us apart, death brought Romanians together. So death in this scenario and in here, there is a pain, an unbearable pain, but there's also a closeness, a really special closeness that might not be the feeling of everyone when they, not everyone feels this way when they lose a grandparent. Some people feel sad but distant. Some people feel heartbroken and completely and totally alone, right? This is the unique experience of our main character, and it really is achieved through personification. And so, with that said, we would want our students to be able to answer this question. In the passage above, how does the author use personification to demonstrate the narrator's feelings about Bunu's death? Could students do that based on what we've highlighted? Absolutely. Would they be able to use the evidence that we've highlighted in order to further that claim? Absolutely. And so whether you're using this, pairing this with another poem about death, or if you want to look into our masterclass resources and look at some of the suggested items that are in there, there are lots of other poems and short stories and lots of places where death specifically is personified, but personification is used in so many other ways. Wouldn't this be so cool to use with the book thief? I can see this being a really awesome pairing with that as well. So I hope this is sparking all kinds of ideas for you, and we will see you in the next class. And I'm really excited. So thanks for being here, and don't forget to leave your questions and comments below, and we'll talk to you soon.